Shalom, my bitches. Myandis here at NFY, bringing you When Deathworlders Visit, Part 3, by Andrew's second account. "Let's find out where we're going, then," said Stephen. The pair stopped in front of an interactive map display, where they could, in theory, interface with the station's AI directly. The map could then be uploaded to their tablets to be displayed through their contact lenses as augmented reality. But the so-sent diplomatic team had suggested that this wasn't the best idea. Even a map projection could be weaponized. Simply by setting the brightness too high would temporarily blind Aranis's sensitive eyes. Instead, they would achieve much the same result by simply looking at each of the maps for every level of the station, and allowing their devices to turn the two-dimensional maps into 3 dimensions, and provide directions. Within moments, a digital path appeared before them, leading them to their destination, 2 levels up and around 300 meters distant. Stephen took his wife's hand, and they began walking to the nearest lift. The hand-holding, as well as having a set pace so neither of them would walk faster than the other, lest they eventually break into a run, and numerous other little unconscious adaptations, had come about as a series of gradual compromises. They never did anything so much as discuss such things openly, reach agreements, or, God forbid, write things down. But they found what worked for them, and mostly stuck with it, depending on how cheeky each was feeling on any given day. Aranis would have preferred to take Stephen by the arm and lead him, he knew, and some days he might let her, or even try leading her by the arm. She had done as much to him almost continuously during the year the pair had toured Earth together. It had made some things awkward. While he had been trying to show her the sights and play tour guide, and she kept leading them in the direction of whatever she found most fascinating at that particular moment. Although she had always been eminently courteous, kind, and respectful, when he brought Aranis to Earth, she was, by human standards, a man in his mid-20s living since birth as a warrior monk, raised on medieval ethics and standards, fresh from his most grueling conquest, all packaged in the body of a sinewy young purple woman, with too few fingers and too many sharp points. 6 years on, and there had been just a few small but noticeable changes. Physically, she had quickly regained the mass she'd lost to starvation, and had even put on a little more muscle than she had started with. Mentally, her medieval ethics had shifted just enough to accommodate her husband, if nothing else. The process of each getting used to the other had not been overnight or without effort. Since they had first met, Aranis had always claimed that his girlishness was one of the things she loved most about him, much as he enjoyed that she was such a tomboy, if a little too rigid and proper. They both loved that they could spend all day drinking mead and eating pizza together, being utterly relaxed in each other's company, while enjoying the exact same childish diversions without fear or shame. Neither loved it when it came time to clean up afterwards. For their first year together, Aranis would just as soon let trash pile up than do men's work. Stephen had no such ingrained compunction, would be stuck picking up after themselves, while Aranis smiled and complimented him. It wasn't nearly as easy as Stephen might have thought to resist such treatment. He had been raised to believe in almost total gender equality. He wouldn't dream of taking a woman by the arm, leading her around like a puppy, expecting her to do all the housework, and generally behaving like the male antagonist in some sort of revisionist period piece novel. It just couldn't connect with him that he might need to assert himself, and remind his, at the time, nominally platonic friend that he was, to her, much more like a sister-in-arms than what she might have expected from the man of her world. It just wouldn't occur to a human male, with only the vaguest concept of disparate gender norms, to feel bothered by a Nixian woman's behavior, conditioned to be supportive of the strong and independent woman archetype as they were. A human male probably wouldn't even attempt to change his partner. At least, not until it had moved well past the cute eccentricity of, "It's so nice feeling loved," and deep into the, "For once I'd like to have input into where we go for dinner, and the petting zoo was a disaster" territory. Possessing as much understanding as she had strength of will, Ernest had made slow but steady gains in accommodating her husband's preferences, just as Stephen had accommodated many of hers. It helped immeasurably that he had never chosen to nag or pester her to stop her conduct. Instead, he eventually found that mirroring the chauvinistic behaviors worked best, and did more to enlighten her to his feelings than anything else. If she had made plans for them one night, he would do the same the following night. If she requested a foot rub from him, he would request a back rub from her. If she refused to clean, they made the maid do it. "My gentleman, I might suggest being more mindful of your words," Aranis said as they walked. "Why is that?" Stephen asked, keeping pace. "You called me a night beast." While he knew she hated the term in the context of dealing with the Galactics, he didn't think it should have bothered her. Nevertheless, "Look, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd be offended. If I had, that's not what I mean, darling," she hastened to say. "You mentioned it to them, and then his AI just happened to confirm that I am indeed Dryantisa. Think about that." "I was just using it for comparison," he said defensively. "I mean, I don't know of any other wild, dangerous predators that Guy might be familiar with. There aren't many others in the GC, if any, after all." "Better to have said nothing, then," she replied. Stephen shrugged. "You might be right. It's a good thing he didn't catch that." "No, aliens are too stupid for that," she said. "What was good was that he decided to blank his tablet screen before he was supplied with any more helpful information. I think the AI would have kept trying to convince him." "Maybe," said Stephen. "Those things are way smarter than they give them credit for." "Indeed. But then, why do they not listen to them?" asked his wife. "Why do they always think they're broken or wrong? Even before I knew what they were, I had seen the aliens, the Takers, wantonly discard them like ruined hides. I have seen two since arriving at this very trading post, no less, in waste bins with nothing more than broken screens. It would seem to me that if you're going to spawn countless lives from the aether like some sort of fanatical alchemist, you would at least take the time to care for them and listen to them, if not try to understand them." "They are aliens, love," he said. "They don't give a damn about living sapients, so don't expect them to care the slightest bit about the artificial ones." Wait a minute. You went dumpster diving again, in the ladies' room." "Yep," she said, smug and not the least bit ashamed. "I like projects." He tried not to let that bother him as the creature spoke to them. "I think there must be some sort of mistranslation. An entire group of new civilizations comes all this way, introduces itself to us, and the first thing its representatives do is threaten the galaxy. That can't be right." Aranis and Stephen exchanged looks. "Is that what you heard, darling?" she asked her husband. Their diplomatic meeting wasn't going quite as planned. It felt less like an exchange of ideas in the context of a negotiation, and more like an interrogation at the hands of a skeptic bureaucrat, which, in fairness, was exactly what it had turned out to be. The couple sat in a room very similar in layout to the previous one they had left not more than an hour ago, though this one held far more in the way of contents. Instead of a plain empty table and simple folding chairs, they sat before a large desk in ergonomic office chairs. On the desk sat a stationary AI terminal, office supplies, various knickknacks, a small bowl of colorful, individually wrapped treats, and a nameplate with a printed, playable audio waveform on top, and Assistant Interplanetary Liaison, Office of Interplanetary Affairs, written below it. Stephen had decided to listen to it, and was not in the least bit surprised to hear more cicada noises. He honestly didn't know what else he was expecting. The creature, a Type 2 male, looked no different than the other Tisrutik he remembered from his stay on the slaver ship. During their extensive debriefing after escaping years ago, he and Aranis had labeled the race Little Scarabs for Confederation governments and scientists. Although that had been something of a misnomer from the beginning, there was nothing little about the massive bugs, but size could be relative. One of the big scarabs they had seen probably wouldn't fit in the room. No, that's not what I heard at all, Stephen said, shaking his head slowly. What she said was that you insist that no GC ships or delegations go anywhere near your colonies, the liaison said, chittering away briskly. Or your space stations, Dyson swarms, or home systems, 2 of which are death worlds under galactic quarantine, and you refuse to provide the location of the 3rd, I might add. Your little group wants to wall off a huge chunk of the galaxy for yourself, and tell the rest of the galaxy not to go there, or else. Aranis folded her arms across her chest, leaned back in her chair, and began tapping her feet. She turned to Stephen with a look in her eyes that said, "Why did we agree to speak with the talking lunch buffet again?" "We did not say that," Stephen countered. "We have a right to privacy, nothing more." "A right?" Bugman asked. "And how will you enforce this right?" "Enforce it?" he replied calmly, but genuinely perplexed. Who said anything about enforcing it? Why should that even be necessary? "Okay, let's start there," said the liaison. "We are the galactic community. We are the galaxy. You don't get to wall off the galaxy for any reason, let alone some imaginary belief in absolute social constructs. There is a maximum allowable sovereignty we permit to subordinate territories, and you have far exceeded the limit with this list of demands." "We are not representatives from some fiefdom's lord," Aranis said. Only a Terran or another Nixian could have known she had spoken through clenched teeth. She took a breath to calm herself before continuing. "The Scorpius Cenarius Confederation is a sovereign government separate from the galactic community." "Ah, I see," said the bug. "There is the source of confusion. Allow me to clarify. There are no governments apart from the galactic community. There are only worlds, peoples, and systems actively participating in the GC, and those considered dormant, whether undiscovered or yet to evolve. All are members. One galaxy, one family is the motto." "Could we be a part of the GC in name only?" asked Stephen. "And maybe you could permit us the stipulations we suggested." "Well, that's not for me to decide," the liaison said. "But the answer would still be no. You are already a part of us. There is no way we would isolate a portion of ourselves from the remainder. Who else will levy taxes on your citizens and businesses, provide for interplanetary outreach missions, set up slave markets, build schools, chart interstellar travel lanes, import teachers to ensure educational conformity, and so forth and so on?" "Darling, he's wasting our time," Aranis said softly, but loud enough for all to hear. Stephen patted the woman's back in acknowledgement. "On another note, let me ask you," began Bugman, "why are you claiming death worlds as your home worlds? Did you find something of interest there to exploit? Whatever business you people think you may have there, I suggest you just leave those places. You'll end up dead if you try anything, and it's illegal." "Noted," Stephen replied, rubbing his brow with both hands. So, that's it then.
That's it, said the liaison. Good day.
Stephen turned to Aranis. His eyes remained fixated on Bugman, arms still crossed. She had stopped tapping her feet. He could almost see her stewing through the hood and veil. His wife was unhappy with the way things were turning out, and tensing up was her way of pouting. Stephen liked to think of Aranis, in terms of her martial abilities, as something of a cross between Carlos Hathcock and a Knight Templar. Even among her own kind, they didn't get much more fearsome than her. She had never lost a single real battle or fight. In diplomacy, however, as in other areas of life, that just wasn't going to be the case. While she must have seen some failures before, he knew too well that she'd strongly preferred never having to experience them at all. This meant she would always stick to things she was good at, if given the choice. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option at the moment. Aranis slowly pushed her chair back and stood. Stephen did the same. There was nothing left to do for now. They would have to devise a different set of approaches and tactics with the team. I guess we'll go report our discussion here to our government, said Stephen. Thank you for your time, and a good day to you as well, sir. With that, both he and Aranis turned to leave. As they approached the door, an electronic beeping sounded from the desk behind them. It had to be from the man's damnable AI telling him something the couple would rather him ignore. Stephen hastened to reach the door, with his wife picking up on the subtle urgency and reaching it first. Trying the handle, she whipped around in an instant, glaring daggers at the liaison. It must have been locked. Stephen slowed his pace to the sealed door. They could probably break it down in less than a minute if they wanted to, but that would mean really taking this mission down the wrong path. He didn't bother with the handle, instead turning around to face Bugman with Aranis. He hoped there might be some way to salvage this situation without violence, though the chances didn't look good. As much to comfort her as to discourage her from doing something rash, he held his wife's hand, squeezing it gently. She did not like enclosed spaces, especially locked ones. Aranis squeezed his hand in return before pulling hers away. She sidestepped to the right for a meter or so and broadened her stance. Twitching one of his mandibles, the seated liaison, still slightly concerned, but mostly dubious at the prospect of a confrontation. He actually thought he was calling her bluff. Oh, this was not good. Sir, we are diplomats, said Stephen. May I ask what this is about? Among our people, even in wartime, diplomats are not treated like this. Stephen began moving slowly back to the desk, the palms of his hands facing up, arms outstretched slightly. The creature may not interpret any specific meaning from the gesture, but it should at least see that Stephen was making an effort to show that he wasn't armed. In truth, he was just trying his best to get between the alien and his wife, though he doubted it would do much to help. That woman was quick.
You may return to your seat, human,
said the liaison, glancing between Stephen and his tablet,
and I will explain.
He gestured to the chair the man had just vacated. Stephen sighed internally. He didn't know how much longer they could keep fooling and fast-talking these idiot GCs. It wasn't actually a mission requirement to do that, to hide their true nature, but it had helped smooth things over. In the end, when they did find out what they were, which they most certainly would at some point, their behavior under the veil of misrepresentation would be demonstration that their people were perfectly safe and reasonable beings. As to the deception itself, so sent xenopsychologists assured them that it was hardly an issue. Deception, in their community, was a practiced art and hardly the worst ideal to which they ascribed value. Stephen glanced back to Aranis. Her posture had already begun to relax. Her arms returning to her sides, feet drawing together, eyes losing their menace. Unsurprisingly, he noted that the woman had deftly, and without anyone else's knowledge, removed her sandals. They were most likely hidden beneath her dress. He only suspected it because she appeared to be standing about a centimeter shorter. Stephen returned to stand next to the offered seat. His wife, it seemed, preferred to remain just where she was, which was just as well, since had she made a move to the desk, things might have gotten ugly. "Let me lay all my cards on the table," said Stephen. "That phrase means—"
"I know damn well what it means,"
the liaison said, his voice tense. He stood abruptly and backed away from his desk, keeping the large piece of metal furniture between himself and the couple.
"It means you've been caught, and you're acknowledging that your pathetic lie has come to an end."
Stephen scratched idly at his cheek. "Wow, I think we should all take a step back and—" A gun appeared in the bureaucrat's hand, deftly pulled from a utility pouch, now leveled at Aranis. Without a thought, Stephen stepped between her and the weapon. Aranis ripped off her veil and threw it to the ground, softly hissing a curse. She kept her jaws clenched and teeth bared, her double set of inch-long pearly white canines peeking through her indigo lips.
"Get out of my way," the man said to Stephen. "Sit. I don't know what this'll do to you, but I won't hesitate to find out."
Stephen looked at the liaison, and then at the weapon he held. The former appeared to be more than he had presented himself to be. He guessed either former military or current military, posing as a civilian government official. The firearm, if it could be called such, looked like it was some kind of dart gun, complete with a compressed gas cylinder slung beneath the barrel. The human considered the creature's words carefully. If the being didn't know what this weapon would do to Stephen, then he meant to use it only on Aranis. "Are you going to shoot her with that?" he asked, stalling for time. Regardless of the response, Stephen suspected he would.
"Absolutely," the liaison replied. "Now sit."
The alien had backed too far away from Stephen to jump him, even in this gravity. On top of that, the desk presented an obstacle. Aranis could have made it from where Stephen stood no problem, but she was even further away, and directly behind them. If he followed the creature's instructions and sat, Bugman would have a clear shot to his wife. Stephen might be okay with that if no one died, but at what cost? Being taken prisoners again? They had both agreed that wasn't even on the table as far as options went. There was no safety in becoming a prisoner. They could both be killed at a moment's notice if their usefulness ran out. Stephen set his jaws and planted his feet. "No."
"I don't know what this tranquilizer will do to your kind," the creature said. "It was engineered for her. It could kill you. We would really like to take you alive, Ambassador."
A low growl began reverberating from behind him. He could hear it, and he knew what to listen for. He wasn't sure about the bug. He sensed Aranis' stance slowly shifting behind him. "You're just going to kill her when you get the chance," said Stephen.
"Of course we are," said the alien. "She's a wanted criminal. You brought a damned escaped serial killer to this station. What in the seven hells were you thinking? Even someone coming in here to spit in the face of the GC and declare independence shouldn't be that insane. No one needs that kind of personal protection, a monster like that. Once we tranquilize her, she's going out the nearest airlock, and you're going to the brig."
"How do you get that tranquilizer?" Stephen asked, thinking fast while trying to ignore the fact that the creature had just admitted to planning to murder his wife. "We only got here. Seems like something that need to be made on the fly."
"Stop stalling,"
the liaison said, his weapon not budging for an instant from Stephen's midsection.
"There's nothing to stall for. Neither of you have any chance of escaping. The door will not admit the station security until after she's been neutralized."
"Shoot me," said Stephen. "She's not a criminal." Behind him, the growl intensified.
"Excrement," the alien said. "Move or get shot and risk death."
"Sit, darling. I'll be okay," Aranis said. "No," Stephen snapped without shifting his gaze. "Shoot me, Bug."
I never thought I'd say this, but listen to the murderer, said the liaison.
My darling, Aranis said slowly and sweetly, please take a seat. Please. To Stephen, her tone sounded anything but pleasant. She was swaying on the edge between uncontrollable rage and madness.
Yes,
said the creature behind the desk.
I know what you're thinking. That your physiology is similar to hers, according to some superficial scan, or because you're shaped the same, or because she seduced you and you've discovered you're compatible. You think that maybe you can handle this drug, or that it will have no effect. I assure you, it doesn't work that way. Don't do this for her. This could kill you.
Darling, sit! His wife screamed out, pouring into her voice every ounce of the terror and menace she possessed. Stephen had never heard anything like it. She was truly backed into a corner and panicked. He had to overcome the very base flight instinct impressed upon him by his own wife. He honestly couldn't imagine what the liaison must be thinking, staring across a desk at a couple of deathworlders. Or could he? The man had to be in a state of temporary shock. Stephen made his move. He charged forward, hand outstretched to deflect the muzzle of the... A soft thump smacked in his chest. His knees buckled, and he collapsed. Before he could even hit the ground, Aranis screeched, quick and fearsome, just as the second thump sounded. Already airborne, her leap had taken her halfway across the room before she fell short, unable to hit the alien with even her dead weight. She smacked the ground hard, landing centimeters from her husband.
Are you all right, human? Asked the Bugman. Are you conscious, at least?
Stephen groaned, his eyes gaining and losing focus as he craned his neck to find Aranis. She had slumped to the floor awkwardly, landing on her stomach, legs spread apart and arms beneath her. Her stunning eyes hadn't lost an iota of their luster, but their vacant stare gutted him faster than any knife could have. She was breathing and semi-conscious, her legs rhythmically kicking in slow motion, as if trying to ride an invisible bicycle, claws scraping the metal deck. Her hands tried shifting out from under her body, pushing up and away. If she were feeling anything like him, she was higher than a kite in a hurricane. Stephen reached out and brushed her cheek softly, getting a mumbled noise in response. He raised his arm to grab hold of the chair he had refused to sit in. Slowly, he pulled himself up onto unsteady feet. He maneuvered in front of the chair before plopping into it. He blinked slowly, trying to get his doubled vision to resolve into one picture of an ugly alien bug. He gathered his thoughts before trying to speak. Wait, did his wife commit some kind of crime?
It doesn't affect you quite as badly as it does the fugitive, it seems,
said the alien, returning to the seat at his desk.
I'm surprised, but that's good. As soon as the drug takes its full effect and she stops moving, we'll have security escort you two to your respective new homes. Should only be a minute or two.
Fuck you, Stephen mumbled out. She's not... A soft whistling came from behind the drugged man, a beautiful and practiced sound. Very soft, but it sounded distinctly familiar. His wife was whistling a series of beats, pulsing through pursed lips, pausing for air, then repeating, again and again. He turned just enough in his chair to look over his shoulder at her. She had managed to flip herself over onto her back, a serene smile plastered on her face. High as a kite? High as a satellite, more like it. A half smile of his own spreading on his face. He turned back to the gun-wielding alien. The liaison now looked on both of them with equal parts amusement and confusion.
Why do you indicate amusement, human? The alien asked. The drug-induced delusion of that criminal is funny to you. Or is this some kind of coping mechanism with your people?
Lucy. Aranis slurred through her smile. The series of whistles began again. It's... Neither, Stephen said, rubbing his head. The drug actually felt really good, but it made it hard to think. I smiled because you have fucked up now. Here, Lucy, come to mommy. Again, the soft whistling repeated.
Sadly, the drug is affecting you. You still might die, said the liaison. That being is crying out for its offspring in what it probably considers its death throes, and you must be under the influence if you think I've made any fatal errors here today.
Who's a good girl? The whistling continued. I don't know about that, said Stephen. I can count 3 errors in judgment you've made so far. Darkness fell on the room, with the sound of mechanical thunking noise, immediately replaced by dim red lights. A circuit breaker might have been tripped. Their host appeared more than a little shocked. Aranis giggled to herself, her toothy smile broadening. Good girl, very good girl. She resumed her whistling. Stephen couldn't help but smile even wider. His wife's laugh was infectious. She did it so rarely, and just seeing her happy, even after having been with her for half a decade, put butterflies in his stomach and made his heart leap.
Damn it!
The alien snapped at Aranis.
Stop that infernal noise, or I will—
Alarm klaxons cut him off. The warbling wasn't the loudest Stephen had ever heard, but it was far from comfortable.
Evacuate the station immediately,
a mechanical voice intoned from a speaker system somewhere above them.
This is not a drill. Biological contagions detected. Hostile security breach detected. Hostile weapons fire detected. Hull breach detected. Level 12 hazardous wildlife detected. Evacuate the station immediately. This is not a drill.
Aranis began to positively cackle on the floor like an excited toddler. After a moment to catch her breath, she resumed her whistling, in between short bouts of laughter. The alien looked absolutely dumbfounded.
What did you do?
He asked no one in particular. The alien used a free hand to stab a button on his desk.
Security! Priority override! Get in here now!
Here, Lucy. They're probably way too busy for that right now, said Stephen. And it's not what we did. You brought this on yourself. Come to mommy. 3 judgment errors you made, he continued. 1. You assumed we weren't in constant communication with our staff back on ship. They've been listening this whole time. Stephen leaned in very close to the alien, still dumbstruck from the eerie red darkness, blaring klaxon and emergency announcement. The creature didn't even bother moving away. 2. You assumed we wouldn't have the means to mount a hasty evac if needed. If Lucifer... A blast of sound tore through the room, deafening, like a shotgun fired into an empty steel drum. Stephen couldn't resist turning to the noise. The door had been freshly dented inward, at least 10 centimeters. Deep, threatening barks pierced the air from the other side, even through the layer of sound-deadening material. Not as loud as the first time. Another violent impact slammed the door, denting inward just a little further. Come to mommy. Barks and whimpers rose in intensity, punctuated by more slams and scraping of claws.
What in the name of the seven hells is that? Stop it! Make it stop!
The alien appeared to be in absolute terror, eyes fixated on the ever more useless door. In the blink of an eye, Stephen slapped the weapon away with an open palm, grasping it at the barrel with one hand and capturing the liaison's wrist with his other, giving it a hard yank. A shot discharged, the round hitting nothing but a bulkhead. The weapon went one direction, the alien's arm in another. The dual trigger well of the pistol took two of its digits with it, instantly shearing them off inside. In his hand, Stephen felt the being's wrist break in several places. It took a moment for the liaison to process what had happened, before the pain set in and overcame the shock. When it did, he screamed briefly before cradling his hand to his chest. 3. Stephen shook the alien's digits and placed the weapon on the desk, muzzled towards its former owner. The last error is the most pressing for your current situation. She is not a criminal. She's a deathworlder, and so am I. The violent slamming, deafening barking, and relentless scraping continued, made all the more horrible by the klaxon and droning announcement. Almost there. Lucifer, Mommy wants to see her little pop-pop.
Oh, 5 lords of heaven, the alien cried softly. That's really her offspring. Please, make it go away. I'll do anything.
That's one of them, yeah, Stephen said, nodding. Well, you could kinda say that anyway. She's an augmented former military working dog, making their way from some distance behind her, I suspect. There are Terran Army Rangers and Nixian Imperial Death Watch. I really don't like aliens, although I imagine you won't get to meet them. The girl will be in here long before that.
Oh, precious lords, no.
Yeah? Won't be long now, Stephen said softly, mostly to himself. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal.
Anything, cried the liaison.
When she gets in here, she's gonna tear you to bits, he said frankly. There's nothing I can do to stop her. The creature whimpered, still cradling his hand. But what I can do is shoot you with this tranquilizer gun before it happens.
I'll die, whispered the alien.
Yeah? You're gonna die either way, said Stephen. But I'm offering you a chance at a quick and painless death before you're ripped to pieces by Mommy's little bed-hogging blanket. Wait, best I can do.
What are you people?
The distraught creature said softly. Another slam, the door almost buckled. Even in the dim red light, he could make out the hallway through a gap forming between the door and its frame. He could see Lucy's gaping maw shining, gnashing teeth, and lashing tongue. The barks had become orders of magnitude louder, with nothing between her muzzle and the room. She alternated between trying to force her body into the small gap to widen it, and throwing herself against the door. Good girl, Lucifer. Almost there. Mommy's right here. So close. Just a bit more. Nope. Not long now, said Stephen. Decide.
I can't,
the alien said, gesturing in the negative. The behemoth German Shepherd burst through the gap between door and frame, bounding to the side of her fallen master, claws scrabbling on the deck as she slid to a halt. Almost immediately, the dog began licking the woman's face. "Decide now!" begged Stephen, slamming the gun down on the table. Smiling serenely, Aranis wrapped her arms around Lucy's neck and meekly pulled herself up just enough to reach the dog's ear and breathe a whisper. "Too late," said Stephen. "Toten." Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. I'm going to be doing multiple recordings of this one. Basically, I want to isolate the variable of the story and try out a couple of different audio things to see, like, whether or not they make the listening experience more enjoyable. I'm also going to be changing up how I do the last segment of them being drugged out. I really don't know how I liked the sound of what I did in this recording, so let me know which of the various endings you prefer, as well as which recording actually has better sound quality. And I would love to have your guys' feedback on this. Anyways, if you enjoyed that one, give me a like, a subscription, and if you so desire to listen to more of my stuff, hit the bell icon right next to the subscription button. And, yeah, have a nice one, y'alls.